Welcome everybody to this Regional Studies Association webinar on building and managing research networks with Professor Mark Tewdwr-Jones. My name is Marte Solheim and I will be chairing this session. The Regional Studies Association is the global and interdisciplinary network for urban and regional research, development and policy. The RSA supports its members with latest research, funding schemes, networking and publishing opportunities, and spaces to grow research and careers. As a response to the global current crisis, the RSA board put in place initiatives to support its members and wider community, such as the professional development webinar series, this one that we're currently undertaking, and which offers sessions on academic publishing, networking skills, and career development. The region's cities industry webinar series that delivers monthly sessions by experts in the field of regional studies, science, planning, or policy. A small grant scheme which funds research on how regions, cities, and industry address the impact of the coronavirus. And more details on these initiatives can be found on the RSA website. This webinar will be recorded and made available for RSA members on the RSA members lounge afterwards. And for questions, please use the Q&A function. So without further ado, I'm very delighted to introduce Professor Mark Tewdwr-Jones. He is UCL Barrett Professor of Cities and Regions at the Centre for Advanced Spatial Analysis, University of College London. He was previously Professor of Town Planning at Newcastle University and Professor of Spatial Planning and Governance at UCL. Mark is a highly recognized authority and has written extensively on place innovation, urban and regional planning, urban history, digital place connectivity, the politics and governance of the city, public engagement, and the use of land. Today, Mark will discuss building and managing research networks and looking into international research with universities, national and regional research with policy and business, as well as local policy with researchers. So Mark, the floor or the screen is yours.
Marte, thanks very much indeed. And thank you also to the RSA for this invite to talk with you today. And I will share my screen with you because I have a presentation. Okay, so as Marta said, this very brief talk is about building and managing research networks. And although I've been involved with the RSA for, at least 25 years or so, it seems, and have been involved with numerous RSA networks and other research and policy networks, it still comes as a surprise sometimes to learn how difficult it is to build networks. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. So this is very much a personal story about my experience of being involved with research networks. And if there's something in there that you can relate to, or if you want to ask questions on the back of, then please do. We'll start with the basic really, and that is, well, what is a research network? And this is my interpretation, but you will find other interpretations. For me, a research network is a group of researchers from multiple universities linked together by a common interest in research field or topic, who may be interested in further exploratory inquiry or analysis of a research question by working together. It's also easy when we work in the research field to think that we're on our own. And I remember way back when I was doing my PhD, I won't tell you when, how isolated you feel. You feel as though you're on your own. And in reality, there are lots of support networks around you in your own institution, with friends, with people who are pursuing similar research fields. But I know how difficult it can be sometimes to reach out and find those people. But it's important that we do, because they can offer you ideas and you in turn can offer them ideas, and you're all in it together. And you realize that as you progress ideas simultaneously, if you're lucky enough to get on with people, it can be fantastically beneficial for the sort of joint work and joint ideas and maybe joint publications that come out from it. The sorts of different types of networks that we have can be anything from individuals from different universities in the same region or the same nation, linking to policy needs, And usually that's on a very specific topic. So it has very tight parameters. And that can be quite useful because then you don't stray off onto other subject matters. Or it can be a network of individuals from different universities addressing nationally relevant issues. And that can be according to national agendas. And some of you will be familiar with that model. And then the ultimate, the third model, is where you have a group of individual researchers from different universities, but also internationally, working on comparative research questions with the intention to explore international similarities and differences. And usually that's more open-ended, and it's the ultimate form of network because it also happens to be the most difficult to do. If you think about people's differences, different cultural backgrounds, different academic paradigms, different methodology experience, and finding ways of bringing all this together can be something of a challenge, but it's still possible to do. How do you build a research network? And again, this is my view. I usually think that rather than be quite daunted by seeing an array of experts and thinking, well, where do I start? I think the best contacts are those that you have already. You already have a web of relations, an existing group of people who work in the research field, maybe in your own institution, maybe beyond it, maybe internationally, that you get on with. And that's an important starting base. You need to, I think, have a research network which is founded on trust and founded on the spirit of collaboration. And if you're uncertain about whether you can simply get on with someone, then maybe it's not a good idea to try and start a network with them. You need an easier route in, and they are the people you just happen to know already. And it's very useful if they happen to be in roughly the same disciplinary or research field as you. You have those existing webs of relations, as they're called, because you have commonalities. You may have studied together, you may have worked together, you may have bumped into people at conferences and other events, and you might have exchanged some basic ideas then. Or you might have reached out to someone through email and offered ideas through email or a piece of writing or received it. They are usually the networks that you can build something from, even if you are not quite using the same academic language at this point. That's all very well, it's a foundation, but what you need to do is find a way of escalating it. So in order for those contacts to become part of a network, you need some nurturing. There needs to be maybe an incentive, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but there needs to be a way of providing mutual support and maybe setting a purpose. It's all very well keeping in contact with each other. That's fantastic. On Zoom meetings all the time these days, of course. But maybe we need to fix a purpose, an objective for everyone to focus on. And that has the benefit then of the meeting of minds and starting to work on specific questions. And that then is also a second foundation stone for moving forward. On other times, these contacts that you have might require that instigation around a common question or common subject. I mean, COVID at the moment is a useful example, terrible example, of course, but a useful example of where there's a lot of research questions being asked about the impact, for example, of COVID on cities and regions and on public space or on transport beyond medical issues. And that is, if you like, an objective. If that is a set question, then it's easier for a group of researchers to start emailing and coming into contact with each other around those sorts of issues and sharing experience. It doesn't have to be new research. It could be your existing thoughts. And please don't hold back from just expressing your ideas to your networks as well, and listening to other people, of course, too. Who to include in the network? Well, undoubtedly, it's your existing knowledge of researchers already in your field. There's a great prize in the academic field of doing interdisciplinary research, trying to share ideas and write together with people from different subject matters, and that is challenging. So as an easier first step, Just go to people already in your subject area, in other schools, in other universities, and build up some research questions momentum from that. They are the easiest route in. Include researchers you think are enthusiastic. That's to say that people will respond to you and be prepared to listen and be prepared to offer advice and are interested in what you have to say. And unfortunately, I've been in so many networks where you have the leaders, but you also have passengers. And the passengers, as I refer to them, are the people who, in internet terms, lurk. They listen, they receive, but they don't impart. And you can't afford to have many of those people in your network. You really need to find a way of making a difference and all of you coming together. So maybe include those that are eager to learn and to listen and to impart, but don't think about including a large group right from the outset. Be very selective, just have a handful of people. And once you have that trust between you, then maybe you can invite additional people in. And the final point on this is don't include big academic names for the sake of it. You might think that there are professors around the world who are the biggest names under the sun, who've published hundreds and hundreds of papers and books, and it's useful to include them. I would say no. I would say just develop trust between a group of researchers, irrespective of what your background and career has been to date. And think about academic names later when there's a need to. But at this outset, I wouldn't include them for the sake of it, unless they can offer something quite unique here. Why set up a research network? Well, don't do it just because it's a good idea. You might see calls from the RSA, for example, for a research network call, a funded network. And you think, oh, let's do it. Only do it if you have a topic or an objective or a research question in mind, because those networks that are set up because simply it's chasing the funding won't last, in my experience. So there needs to be a real purpose of having the network there. And that's usually to extend knowledge or to fill a gap or to explore methodologies and be perhaps pilots for future ways of thinking and developing and writing later on. Participants in the network should be willing to learn as well as impart knowledge. And I've been in several networks where people just shout at each other. I mean, not loudly, but simply just emit everything they've got to say on the topic. And are not really interested in learning from other people. The whole point of a network is that we learn as we go along, and we are prepared to admit that we lack knowledge, that we have questions that we don't know the answers about, because that exploration then will lead to something much more significant. If you only have people in who just aren't listeners, then they don't make the best participants in the network. Set a time frame. Don't be too ambitious, but set a time frame for the existence of the network. And that could be 12 months, it could be 24 months, but I wouldn't go beyond that sort of length of period. And equally, I wouldn't do anything and expect answers maybe in 3 to 6 months either. It takes a long time for you to get familiar with each other, to listen to each other, to understand each other, and to understand different positions. And if you're coming from maybe different nations, and if you're coming from different disciplines, that time takes even longer as well. So it takes a long time just to simply build up the knowledge of each other before you can really get into the research questions. So don't be too ambitious too quickly. These things will take time. And lastly, it needs management. There needs to be a facilitator or leader of the network that's prepared to prompt people in different places to participate in the network. Just because you set something up doesn't mean to say it happens automatically, and especially over long time periods. So sometimes you need either to be a facilitator yourself or to expect someone else to really keep that network momentum going. And I think research networks are a bit like household plants. They require regular attention, they require regular feeding, otherwise they can just wither away. So you really need to keep on reminding your network participants that they're part of the network and they can offer something very special. Face-to-face meetings are the best, but of course, at this point in time, they're very difficult to achieve, and who knows when that will change. So use other forms, use Zoom meetings, hijack conferences. If you all happen to be attending the same organized conference, then use a coffee session, a breakout period in order to have a catch-up meeting. Use LinkedIn and WhatsApp and social media, use emails. And that keeps, if you like, the exchange of ideas and the excitement going as well. Be prepared to share your new ideas, and people can be quite reluctant to do that, but you don't have to send complete papers to people that are unpublished. You can simply share a few lines and bullet points or a paragraph, because that is a prompt. What do you think of this? I want you to respond before I say anything more, and hopefully other people will do the same. And then think about this incentivization issue. Usually that keeps minds focused. An open-ended 2-year network that just keeps on chatting, exchanging ideas without an end in sight and a goal in sight can sometimes be difficult to maintain. So something that has maybe a promise of a publication, we will work towards a journal special issue, might be the best way of keeping that momentum and excitement going, or a conference session, or maybe new funding as well. And then my last slide is sometimes, usually, a really fantastic exchange of ideas will happen. So as you build up those contacts and you exchange ideas, that in itself is a success. If ultimately then that exchange of ideas leads to something more prominently fantastic, if ultimately at the end of that period of time, say 2 years away, it leads to a publication or a conference or a book, that's absolutely brilliant. But be modest in your ambitions. Simply getting people around the computer screens or the table is successful in itself, because you'll meet some really interesting people. And even if you don't produce anything together immediately, you will always rely and go back to those people over your academic career as well. And sometimes, sad to say, research networks just don't work out. And I've been on a few where we've had successes, but equally it has withered away and we haven't produced anything at the end of it. But the important is to learn from that experience. I'm always learning from the people that I'm coming into contact with. And it doesn't matter that I've been in the game a long time, I can still learn as I go on. And if I thought I couldn't learn, I shouldn't really be in a network at all. So use your experience as the basis of other networks and how to approach other academics ultimately. And what the important point I'll end with is this: use networks to always, always think big and bold. Think big, but dream bigger. And at that point, I'll end.
Thank you very much, Mark. This was really insightful and interesting. Building purposeful networks, not only for the sake of it. So we have received quite a few questions here, and I will just start by the first one here. How early on in your career do you suggest to join a research network?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and there's no set answer. I suppose when you feel as though you've got something to say is the most obvious answer I would give from my perspective. You can learn, of course, but if you think you've got something that you need to share with others, even if it's not formulated into a paper that's been published, or maybe it's been trialed in a conference paper, you can start to reach out. But maybe not to form a complete network at that stage, but just to share ideas with 1 or 2 people and see what comes back. It might be that you don't say, let's form a research network. It might simply be, let's keep on emailing each other and exchanging ideas. And that can be done when people are doing PhDs. It certainly can be done on a much more formal basis as you develop your career. But I would say, if you've got something to say, don't hold back and start to make contact with people.
Yeah, it's great. You're also talking about this having a good academic culture, right? To have this trust-based and also being open and not afraid to share. So there was also another question sort of referring to that, they asked, how could you build credibility in order to be able to join a kind of research network?
I have a particular view on this, which is don't afraid to think that you're looking stupid. So say something anyway. Unfortunately, we're in an academic world on times that is full of very senior professors who think that they have the automatic right to hold all meetings and to dominate debate. And they're a diminishing group, I think, but nevertheless, it's sad when that happens. I would say I would be much more respectful of even early career researchers if they challenge me, constantly challenge me and constantly challenge my ideas. And so if you've got something to say, it's about, I know it's difficult, but developing the confidence to be able to say it. And even if you think it's a naive question or the question might be obvious, I would still say, ask it and make contact with people, because that's how we all learn. But also it's this equitable arrangement as well, that everyone should have an equal voice, irrespective of what experience that you've had. So it's one of confidence, but it's also one of constant questioning and constant challenging. And we should not be too respectful of people who have been around a long time, who think they know best, because I think they should be challenged. And I include myself in that as well.
Yeah, that's also a nice sort of introduction to one of the questions that was asked here after you mentioned a little bit of inclusion of big names in sort of your research network. So one of the questions we got here is if you could be a little bit more specific on the big names problem.
I was fearing that. I'm not going to name names, but
I was thinking more in terms of the way I read it was also maybe more in terms of the sort of some of the barriers or some of the pitfalls you could have from including big names in your research network.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm trying to be general here. I think there are times when the senior researchers see it as an opportunity to get new ideas that they will then appropriate. I don't mean run off and publish and plagiarize, but simply that they will run with an idea without giving you the chance to be able to nurture that idea and own it yourself. And if the senior researchers are there, what they should be doing is finding ways to support you in developing your ideas much further and developing your academic career. We've all come up the ladder and we've been really successful, and we are very grateful to the people who supported us as we developed our career. But equally, now that we're up the ladder, we should be looking at everyone else to bring them up as well, rather than just think this is my idea and I'm going to take it forward. So the danger is that I'm not saying all senior professors are like this, but occasionally you have professors who will take the idea and then they become the leader of that network. And the danger is they drown out other people's voices. And that's not a research network. I mean, that is a research laboratory headed by a senior figure, but that is not a research network in my view.
No, that's excellent. You're talking about building also this trust-based and nurture it and to create sort of this psychological safety that we have this inclusive workplace. But in line with that, do you have any examples of where a research network failed, and maybe if there were obvious reasons for why it went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, but there's one example that we've recently done, John Harrison, Daniel Gallant, myself, on metropolitan planning and governance. And that was a research network that lasted something like 2.5 to 3 years with colleagues right across European continent. And we met every few months in different places. So there was funding available, and that's a critical issue because that is an incentive. And it led eventually to a book that's just been published. So that was a success story. The less successful involved a project I was involved with on peripherality and spatial planning in Europe. And we met over 2 years and from several different universities in Europe and the UK. And we produced a report at the time, and we had lots of plans then to write publications on the back of it. And unfortunately, some people moved institution. So you immediately then, you were losing people from the network through no fault of their own. And the one of the leads went off and ran a different project and wasn't able to commit the time to sustaining the network. So despite that 2 years of experience, it failed in the sense that it didn't lead to any publications or conference sessions whatsoever. But we're all still friends. And we're all still in touch with each other. And occasionally, even though, believe it or not, that was 20 years ago, we still have learned that you can take some ideas that we discussed at the time and find another purpose for it. So you're always trying to turn a disappointment into another opportunity. And it might not be with the same group of people in the network, it might be with a different network. But sometimes those failings can be of no fault of your own or the participants, it's just one of circumstance.
Yeah, that's, I mean, how do you measure failure? I mean, you're still friends, and there's still this good vibe there. But another question is also referring to if you're able to build a network around an idea of a special issue, or is that too constraining, or should you start with something more general and see if that leads the way?
That it's a good way, because you know at this day and age, we're all supposed to be publishing, and we're all supposed to be publishing in the best journals, and we all should be international in our perspective. So something like an international journal, and going to the editors and asking for special issues such as regional studies, makes calls periodically, is a good way to focus minds. I'm currently guest editing a special issue for regional studies on the future of cities and regions, city regions, and foresight methods on how you look at vision and future of places. And the call is currently out till the end of the month. That's my plug, by the way. But we've just put it out there without forming a network and seeing who's interested in coming forward. And I thought something on city regions would attract a lot of people. But in the event, maybe people are noticing that the futures and foresight aspect of it is perhaps too narrow. So I think to date, we've only had something like 10 people express an interest in contributing to that paper, that special issue. And we'll follow up on that, of course, as well. But sometimes maybe I've learned that you can set a special issue topic too narrowly. And I think that's what we have in this case. Having said that, if the 12 individuals or sets of individuals come forward with really great ideas, then not only can we progress a special issue of 12 papers, we can think about perhaps a modest research network which takes some of the ideas forward in a different way. So I'm always looking at the positives, even when you're learning from your mistakes.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe after this webinar you will have more people wanting to join this special issue. Yeah. We're still have some time for a few more questions, and there was one here about your recommendation for the time frame for a network. If you could say something more about that.
Yeah, that's just from my experience of how long it takes to develop this sense of partnership and collaboration, because that's what the network really should be about. It's an exchange of ideas, and you really want to be able to get on with people, because sometimes you're going to set deadlines to each other, and you want to feel as though people will play the game and respond timely. Simply, I think some of the networks that have been involved with this taken 12 months just to reach a common level of understanding and trust before you even get on to the idea of writing or working on ideas together. If, on the other hand, you've already got the basis of a network there through friendships, through contacts, and you know where each other's coming from, you know your disciplinary background and theirs, you know what sort of methods they can offer, then maybe the setting up of the network can be achieved much faster. But usually I tend to build in additional learning time and making contact time into the first period, the first half of the network. And once that's achieved, then you can go on and discuss the much more complex academic ideas on the back of that. And you know, something like a RSA research network can be over 2 years or something like that. I think that's an appropriate time. And it also gives people then time, if you're working towards, say, an edited book or special issue journal paper, then it gives people time to coalesce their ideas and develop them into writing, because we know that writing is also a bit of a luxury for many of us, trying to find time to do it beyond our day-to-day teaching and administrative tasks as well. So that length of time is meant to be the trust, the build up of the collaboration and the exchange of ideas before going to outputs.
Yeah, thank you very much. I see that we have still some questions, so we will. It looks like we're going to overrun slightly, if that's okay with the speaker here. I'm very sorry about that, but I think it's quite a lot of interest in this topic. So we will overrun a little bit, but not more than 10 minutes. So stay with us. So there's another question here. What are the network pitfalls to watch out for?
I think I've covered some of them already, yeah. And that is when some of the participants move on. Yeah. I mean, move institutions. So there might be a commitment which is at institutional level rather than individual level. Haven't really talked about that in the presentation, but there could be relationships. Many universities have relationships with other universities globally, and the links might be between the institutions rather than the individuals. So as you develop that network, if the key contact in one of the universities just happens to move jobs or move on to another very important task, then sometimes that really frustrates the network. So that's one example. Another one is when you have one person dominating the network, and that might be someone who likes the sound of their own voice too much. You've got everything they can say on the topic, because that really allows, it makes people go into their shell a bit and feel as though they can't express themselves. And that's bad. And on other times, it's simply that you run out of ideas and you've explored something. Remember, a network is an exploration. It's an exploration of something different or something new, rather than existing knowledge. You might be bringing existing knowledge to the table, but really you want to learn and develop knowledge and develop methods. So sometimes you try and push the boundaries a little bit further and push each other a little bit further to find these absolute new ideas. And sometimes you just run out of steam, that you can't take things any further. And that is totally disappointing if you've been, working for 2 years to find that that's the position you're in. But as I said, that is disappointing for the network, but it's not necessarily disappointing for the ideas and the learning and the experience of being involved with the network. And you've just got to find ways of taking what happened and using them for other purposes.
Yeah, really good. Also, another question here about if you could say something more about research collaboration for interdisciplinary research, as it is challenging. Is there any story to share how it may work?
Yeah, when I was at Newcastle University until 6 weeks ago, one of my tasks there as a professor and director of something called Newcastle City Futures was not only to find ways of linking the university to external groups, such as government and businesses and communities. It was also to find ways of linking together schools and faculties inside the university. And as a geographer and a planner and a social scientist, that meant I had to not only go and talk to other parts of the social sciences like sociology and political science and economics, and that was difficult in itself, but also start to talk to engineers and medics and computer scientists. And that's really tough. I mean, the first issue, I suppose, is they think, why the hell are you here? You're not from my subject area. But you have to bring something to the table. So depending on the nature of the interdisciplinary topics that you're talking about, subject matters, if you're going beyond the social sciences to the science, humanities, and technology, you've got to offer something. And the offer is something to do on the social science side with place and people and democracy and behavior and visualization. Those are, if you like, some of the themes that maybe those hard science STEM subjects lack. So you're offering a particular skill set and methods to them to join with them that they ultimately can benefit from. And it might be the interpretation of science or health indices in a way which is much more accessible. So we had success in developing joint research projects of an interdisciplinary nature by the social scientists and humanities offering those sorts of skill sets to the hard scientists and medics. And in return, we would get budget lines on their large-scale grants. Equally, they were learning something about how to use phraseology about cities. So the scientists kept on referring to urban laboratories. The city is an urban laboratory. And saying, but we're not lab rats, okay? And the people aren't lab rats. So be very careful about that use of language when you're dealing with members of the public, because they simply will be offended or simply won't get it for that matter. So you can explore these ideas, and that could form the basis of a research network even inside your own university. We set up a small working group which could be regarded as a research network, just to find ways of sharing ideas what we want to. Because if you're talking about cities, it is not only the social scientists who love cities. Increasingly, you have the scientists and the computer scientists and the data analytics people who are all doing stuff on cities. And so there needs to be a way that you present to each other what skill sets and knowledge you have, hopefully to the benefit of everyone.
That's really good. You're talking also about, I mean, having this, making it relevant. So relevance and purpose for the people participating. And I think that links really well also to a question that we got here that I think you have answered partly already, but how research networks once created for the purpose of developing a specific project can last in the longer term. So which factors do you envision could sort of facilitate this long-lasting networks in academia?
I think if you're talking about the participants who've been inside this project and have shared knowledge and developed the project or the report together and keeping that same group of people forward, I think there is sometimes the case that not everyone will want to carry on, that some people will want to go on to the next specific government report or something like that. So it may well be that some people will develop a research network that were originally part of the group, but not everyone. And don't feel as though you need to include everyone. Certainly give everyone the opportunity, but if people decide not to pursue a second wave, that's fine. It might be an opportunity at that stage to bring in fresh faces. And that will really kickstart the group in a different sort of way. And you might then go slightly tangentially beyond what you've thought the network would be about into something completely new. And that is fascinating. I'm one of these academics that can't say no. I'm constantly fascinated by everything, too fascinated by everything, because then, let's build this in and let's build that in. And let's include them as well, because I'm always searching for challenges to my own knowledge. And that can be much more difficult to manage when you try and open it up too widely. But maybe developing a network on the basis of an original project with one or two additional new people in who are what we call wildcards, who perhaps not from the same disciplinary field or from outside the academy for that matter, they will bring something new there, and that will create a momentum in itself to kickstart the project in a different way.
Thank you very much. I think we'll just take the last question as time is running fast here. And the last one is here. If you could say, and I'm very sorry for the ones that we not have time to finish, but just please in 1, 2, 3 steps, how could I form a network or join a network is a question that we got here.
Probably the very easiest way is to look at where networks already exist. I didn't cover that in my presentation, but there are plenty of learned societies around in our sort of disciplinary fields that already have networks in place. And sometimes they seem closed shops. Sometimes they seem very elitist and they're already working together. But see if you can join, see if you can offer them an idea, and in return say, is it possible to be part of this existing network? So organizations like the Royal Geographical Society, like the RSA, have these quite specific networks in place. And there might be an opportunity to simply become part of that network as an affiliate. That would be the easiest way. And providing they say yes, you have your foot in there. And that's the good basis of working with them. Setting up something on the basis of people that you know is the second phase, I think, because you will be happy to socialize with each other when it's possible to do it, as much as develop ideas of an academic nature. And it's always fun meeting up with people that you know and get on with, and the sort of people you bump into at coffee at conferences or go for a drink with. They are really good people to kickstart something else. And then the third group is starting something from scratch, like a special issue journal, like reaching out to people that you wouldn't know necessarily, but you try and embrace them. So if you really do want to develop a network, I would say start small, go for the existing ones, go for people that you know, and then ultimately, if those two are problematic, go for the more ambitious one, but start modestly, even with the ambitious one as well.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much for giving us this presentation today. I would also like to thank all the participants that have been here today, and remind you that this a recording of this webinar will be made available on the RSA in the RSA members lounge. You can also see that this is a weekly series. You can also go online and see at the RSA what we have there. So thank you so much, Mark, and goodbye to everybody.
Thanks everyone for participating. Thank you.